welcome to the Wellbeing at MSU podcast. I am your host, Dr. Alexis Travis. I'm Senior Associate Vice President for University Health and Wellbeing here at MSU. Today we're going to be talking about a subject that impacts many of us, which is stress. It's part of our daily lives, but it's detrimental in large and chronic amounts on an ongoing basis. So our guest today, Lisa Laughman, coordinator of the Spartan Resilience Education Program. Lisa has been with MSU since 2003, and she is a recent recipient of the Jack Breslin Distinguished Staff Award. Secondly, Jon Novello is director of the Employee Assistant Program here at MSU. Jon is a licensed clinical social worker and has been a practicing counselor since 1996 and joined the EAP in 2004. Welcome, both of you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thanks for
Pleasure.
having us.
So, we know that faculty and staff success is deeply intertwined with student success. In fact, they're inextricably linked. You can't have one without the other. According to a recent article in University Business by Erin Andrews, when faculty are overextended, their ability to support students diminishes. Some faculty are working as much as over 60 hours a week, and that is requiring them to be always on for students. So we will put a link in the show notes about that article so everybody can take a look. But that is, as I would say, less than ideal as a situation for faculty and staff to be navigating. So I have a few questions for you today. The first is, with this interconnectedness in mind, the Health and Wellbeing Survey found that both between 1/3 and 1/2 of employees at MSU expressed that they were concerned about their stress levels at work. What sources of stress are you seeing among faculty and staff here at MSU?
Yeah, a lot. The biggest thing that we see a lot in the EAP, the clients that we're seeing when faculty and staff come in, is really centers around uncertainty. A lot of concern and worry about just being in a space where the future is unclear, right? Whether that's in the world or just here in America or here at MSU, with the number of changes that have gone on just both here at MSU, but also just in the government with funding. I'm sure we'll talk about that a little bit later too, but with the scarcity of resources, and then just concerned about the reality of this moment and what's happening around us. People are very uncertain, and being uncertain, living in a state of chronic uncertainty is hard for people. And so that's the primary thing that sort of drives a lot of what we're seeing right now. I ran a little report before I came in, just because I was curious of the top reasons that people are coming to the EAP right now, just this year, since this school year. And so work concerns, relationship concerns, grief and loss, anxiety, stress, adjustment and transition, so just life changes, just the stress that comes with that, work environment concerns, family concerns, and trauma. So those are the specific reasons that people are coming in to see the EAP. But underneath a lot of this sits uncertainty, like a worry about what the world looks like. Yeah.
That's really interesting because those are really all over the map. They're personal at home, they're here in office, they're here bigger picture, right? And so it's quite a lot of competing different issues.
Yeah.
How do those show up?
Well, it's interesting because they show up, they are different. And so what's interesting is that we navigate stress all the time in our lives, and we are wired to be able to handle a certain amount of stress. And as you mentioned at the beginning, stress by itself is not a problem. So in terms of how it shows up with people coming in worried about their funding, whether or not they're going to have a job. Some people coming in and their partner, who maybe works for the state government, right, lost their job right? And they're having concerns about like a sense of identity, and this has maybe been their whole career, and now there's like nothing there anymore. It may be a series of losses, right? And so there's the losses we typically see that we expect that are losses, like the death of a family member or someone that's close to us, and compound that with the loss of a sense of security about my future, right? And then you throw into that people in marginalized statuses in the world, right? Black or brown people, women, LGBTQ, like there's people who just don't have clarity about how safe they actually are, and that compounds it too, right? So we're just surrounded by uncertainty, and it just doesn't do great with us.
Yeah. Thank you for explaining that a little more. I also think about the fact that we're a Big Ten university, and with that comes kind of some unique pressures. People naturally gravitate towards sports, but then when we think about being a research institution, being a place where there's great pressure around academic success, education, but then also the research piece. So Lisa, what do you see as, in the Spartan Resilience Education Program, the benefits of being able to build capacity with our Spartans and maybe equip people with some skills to deal with this everyday stress in advance?
Yeah, as Jon was just saying, the stress that people are experiencing, I feel like, is compounded differently than it has been in the past. I know lots of folks that work in higher education, and they're saying their jobs are more difficult and challenging than they have been in their entire career. So the context of working in higher education is more intense right now. And then the workplace culture issues then are compounded, and then the work-life balance issues are compounded. So I don't know very many people who aren't dealing with hard and heavy on a regular and consistent basis. And I think a lot of folks are stress saturated because they just don't, have a break from the constant nature of it. I think technology and tech and the constant need to be in connection with it all is exacerbating that. And so we have folks that are struggling with the weight of the times and the weight of the context of higher education, plus their work-life balance issues, which have always been part of what we've been navigating. And then the vast majority of people are lacking skills. And they're lacking skills because as a culture, Western culture, we're born with some natural skills, like to be able to navigate our emotions. But you don't have to teach a baby how to have a full range of emotions. They just do. And then during the socialization process, we get taught rules, we develop beliefs, we get gender coding and other things put on top of us. And now we're like systematically inhibited from healthy expression. And so K through 12 does a better job than they used to of teaching skills like mindfulness and grounding practices, somatic healing practices. But still, the vast majority of people get to an institution like this, both students and employees, without a solid set of skills. One place you get those skills is in counseling. And in my career with Jon at the EAP, I watched over and over how people who had a really hard thing happen and they had the wherewithal and maybe not any stigma and then got themselves to counseling, we saw them develop a set of skills that was really helpful to them, both about the issue that they presented with, but then also they had those skills ongoing. And I've often thought, well, sometimes we're the lucky ones, the ones that need counseling, because we happen to get the skills. And so at Spartan Resilience Education, we're trying to make that skill building available to all Spartans without hopefully a need to come to counseling or to support in addition to counseling. So to take that core set of skills that we've been identifying for a while now through focus group conversations and through data like Jon shared from the EAP. The set of skills includes things like psychological flexibility, a growth mindset, emotional resilience, being a gatekeeper of your own nervous system and being able to notice when you're triggered and you're in fight flight and being able to have solid grounding practices. Like we throw the expression uncommon will. It's part of our branding, right? But we believe that uncommon will requires uncommon skill. We're just ordinary humans trying to do extraordinary things right now. And I think every Spartan deserves to have a core set of skills. And so great if we give them those skills before they need it, but even if they're right in the middle of it, it's still going to help. And if they're right in the middle of it and don't have the wherewithal to go look for it, but their professor embedded it in their first year writing course, or their supervisor made it part of their staff meeting, they don't even have to go look for it. Like, we want to infuse it in the Spartan experience.
Wow, you said a lot there. I'm just processing, in terms of what you said about being a gatekeeper of our own nervous systems. And then also in terms of, you talked about it in kind of, it's not either or, right? It could be alongside counseling.
Oh, absolutely.
Or it could be before counseling, or even after, right? Or as
Exactly,
part of the
exactly,
counseling process.
exactly.
And I think that's really powerful for Spartans to know that there is an opportunity to acquire those skills here, and it is supported and encouraged. I also like the effortless way of kind of, not effortless to embed it, but the fact that it is embedded, because I know
Yeah.
a lot of work goes
Yes,
into
yeah, for sure.
doing that, but making sure that we're making it easier for students to access
Yeah,
this.
Dr. Travis, I was 30 years old. I had 2 degrees. I outwardly looked very successful to people, but inside I was a hot mess. John knew me back then. We met when I was learning these things. And because I worked for a workplace who was going through a merger, and they brought some trainers in that were talking about this set of skills, I was able to, without ever knowing I needed those skills. I didn't realize I didn't have those skills. In fact, I kind of thought I did because I had a master's degree in social work. But without, it came to me, and it changed the course of my life. And my health and well-being, my psychological well-being, my relationship health, the way I show up in my parenting, all of that is dramatically different because my workplace brought it to me.
Thank you, Lisa. That was powerful, just sharing your own personal experiences. So this is an excellent resource. How can we make sure that Spartans listening know where to go to access them?
Yeah, the best way to find out what we're doing right now is through the UHW website. There's a Spartan Resilience page, and there's also a Mindful State page. They can get information there. Or you can email spartanresilience@msu.edu.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So just picking up on your last comments, many Spartans are dealing with their own personal, physical, or mental health issues. And as they're trying to provide services, care, education to either students, faculty, or staff, how can we make sure, Jon, that people are equipped to recognize the early warning signs and then know where to go when they need resources?
Yeah, when we talk about these early warning signs, often what we're talking about actually is probably wandering itself to burnout, right? Because again, like we were talking about earlier, stress by itself is a normative human experience. Like, we're equipped to navigate stress, and stress itself is sort of activating. It encourages us to act and do a thing. But when we're talking about burnout, that's a state of deactivation, right? It's shutting down because you're too overwhelmed. There's too much stress. There's too much coming in that I can't do it anymore. And so some basic, simple early warning signs are noticing withdrawal, feeling depressed, feeling hopeless, feeling discouraged or cynical, having less interest in the kinds of things you usually like to do, or just like no energy to do them. For people, particularly people that notice, let me say that a little differently, a significant change, observing a significant change in how I experience my coworkers, my constituents, the people that I serve. Like, if I'm getting frustrated quickly with them, and like I'm holding on to that all day long, and typically like I haven't had that experience, that's a big sign, right? That I'm beginning to get really overwhelmed and probably wandering to burnout if I'm not already there yet, right? So those are really some of the big things. That cynicism and disillusionment, like that's a big one. And what's interesting is that that's the kind of thing that people can live with for years and feel sort of justified in that, because you can look around in the world and think, well, the world is really difficult and hard, right? And find lots of reasons and evidence to sort of support that, and stay in the cynical place because it's protective, right? We use the cynicism as a way to protect us from the difficult things that are going on, but it wears us down, over time, right? And is more of a symptom of the burnout rather than, and it's being caused by the circumstance, right, that's going on, but it's another drain, right, that ends up leading to really difficult emotional realities for people.
And typically, people, when they're in burnout, they're more likely to think something's wrong with them than to see that the situation is stacked up right now.
Yeah. And actually, what's interesting about that too is sometimes even well-meaning supervisors, managers, leaders can create situations where they kind of put the onus on the employees to navigate and deal with the burnout experience themselves rather than wondering about like what structurally might be going on, right? And so you get like really great leaders who are going, you guys make sure you're getting out there and like take your breaks and, you know, take your time off and like make, you know, set your boundaries. And they're going, but I can't take time off because if I do, then I get in trouble, you know? And I literally just had a conversation with, just before I went on break a couple weeks ago with a group of people who this was their struggle, right? They had really lovely supervisors who really wanted to be supportive, but the structure of the system and the policies that were put in place, right, were creating a situation that was making it impossible for employees to feel safe with taking time off.
Right.
So they're being told to take time off, but the structures made it so that they would get in trouble if they did, right? That's burnout.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's the structure, and sometimes it's the person's work ethic.
Oh yeah, that's true.
And the dominant cultural narratives around, you know, the kind of the capitalistic work ethic where people don't feel like they can leave their work unfinished. So
Right.
sometimes it's the system, and sometimes it's the internal belief system, and sometimes it's both.
Right. And the truth is, the work will never be done.
It will
right?
never
It's
be done.
always going to
done.
be something else. So it's almost like you're reaching for the impossible, right? If you're trying to get everything done before you can unplug or switch off. And I always say that rest is not earned. We need rest, and we just need to take it.
Yeah, right,
So-
absolutely.
Yeah. So when we think about Spartan employees who might be getting to that place where they're finding things unmanageable, where can they go to access resources and support?
Yeah, well, so they can always go to Spartan Resilience. It's an amazing service. So the Employee Assistance Program is a counseling center for employees, right? And so we offer short-term intensive counseling for really any MSU employee who is dealing with any issue. It doesn't have to be just work-related. It can be any kind of thing. I mean, as evidenced by that list I gave you earlier, which was all over the place. So, they just need to let us know. They just give us a call. We try to make it as easy as possible. Wait times are real short in comparison to, if someone were to reach and get counseling outside of here, which is also an available option for people because MSU's insurance is actually really good, particularly for mental health services. And so that's always an option. But if they want to try the EAP, we try to make it real easy and accessible, and usually we can get people in within less than a week these days.
That's great to hear. And who specifically is eligible for the EAP?
Well, that's a great question. So all MSU benefits eligible employees, so faculty, staff, graduate student assistants, so graduate students who have a research assistantship or a teaching assistantship or both are also benefits eligible. All MSU retirees, anyone who's ever retired from MSU is also eligible for the EAP, and the spouses and partners of all those folks and the benefits eligible children of all those folks are also eligible for EAP services anywhere in the state of Michigan.
That's a lot of people who
A
are
lot of
eligible.
humans. Yes, it is.
And I always say your team is small but mighty.
Thank you, yes.
So are there norms in higher education that we might need to think about kind of modifying to better support health and well-being? I see you already starting to smile. And what stigma still exists around stress, burnout, and asking for support, specifically in academia?
This is a big and wonderful question to ask, and it's nothing we can fix or necessarily correct today. And I'm going to just acknowledge that my views on this are very likely biased by my career here at MSU in higher education as a mental health provider, specifically for faculty and staff. But the biggest thing, which you already referenced really, is that higher education in general tends to have an institutional culture that really romanticizes and rewards overworking, right? And it sets it as the expectation rather than the exception, and that's true for faculty as well as staff. So even though staff aren't necessarily in an academic space, right, it is very much the case that that sort of perception sort of like permeates everywhere, right? The idea that the overwork is the way to what we're supposed to be doing is expected. And so, like you mentioned at the beginning, some faculty are working 60 plus hours a week, and some staff are actually
our
working.
staff as
Mhm.
well, yeah.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
also working 60, 70, sometimes 80 hours a week. So that culture by itself, right, which is tied, it's very old, it's very patriarchal and capitalistic, it's very much connected to, the tenure system is very connected to that, right? But the idea that we work because the career is what defines us really lends itself to folks burning out over time.
I think another factor in here that we haven't necessarily mentioned is the human giver aspect of our faculty and staff, and I would also say our leaders and executive leaders. These are people who care about people, and so if a student needs something, but you're already working a lot of hours, people are going to do the thing the students need, or the faculty and staff, other faculty and staff need, and not being able to step away from the helping role, even when they're saturated. That, we have to help people be better able to recognize when they're saturated, and we have to normalize that it's okay to wring out. My favorite metaphor to use is a sponge, right? It's like we all know how to use a sponge, and when we're cleaning up the messes, and the sponge's job is to clean up the mess and take care of the business. And it's agreed to do that, and it's signed a contract to do that, right? But when the sponge is saturated, we wring it out. We don't even think twice about it. And we actually know when it needs to be wrung out. Like no one has to tell us, hey, wring out your sponge, right? Can you imagine if you never wrung your sponge out while you're it's just like you were going to save it for the weekend or maybe that vacation or maybe at the end of the semester you'd wring it out. It'd be like smelly and gross, right? But and we know the sponge isn't broken, it's just saturated and it needs care immediately. But when we're saturated, we tend to make up a story that there's something wrong with us, that we're not able to do it. I can't get my self together. And we need to help people recognize, I don't even think we should call it self-care. I think we should call it stress mitigation protocols because that sounds more professional. And we could talk about that in our performance reviews. We could say, what are your stress mitigation protocols? So that if John's my supervisor and he asks me that and I say, if I'm getting rid of my stress juice, you're going to see me walking out to Beaumont Tower. You're going to see me going around the building. You're going to see me chatting with my colleague Jesse. This is what helps me wring it out as I'm going through my day, which he should support as a health promoting supervisor because it doesn't do him any good or the business any good to have me saturated in the middle of the day, right? And so how are we thinking about that differently and supporting each other? Because it could 2 hours from now, John could be saturated and his employees might want to recognize that their supervisor's saturated and give him some space to do what he needs to do because we're all humans trying to do this extraordinary thing called life, right?
I just love that imagery of the sponge. I think it makes it really relatable. And I think about also what you shared, John, about kind of, the systems and maybe the policies and procedures that make that piece a little bit more difficult, right? And I think that's why the Okanagan Charter work is so important.
Really important.
Because it's really about that systems level and creating the environments where people can thrive and supporting the work that you all do, whether it's with smaller groups or in population-based or individual one-on-one counseling as well. So to make sure our supervisors are supported to not only care for themselves but care for the team.
To know how
that
to
they
care
are
for the team.
How.
To know how.
trusted
There's a different set of skills that supervisors need to know how best to support someone who's both working and grieving and caregiving and parenting and.
When we say supervisors, I think it's important in an academic setting to say that we also actually mean deans and
directors,
chairs, and
chairs.
directors,
Absolutely.
right? And because sometimes when we say supervisors, I think that gets sort of sectioned into staff, right? But we really do mean deans and chairs. Deans and chairs are not taught how to be leaders of humans, right? They are much like the case. This is true for in many workplaces, but people who excel at their job then are often promoted to leadership positions. That doesn't mean that they're good at this other thing, which is really hard. But to your point, if we don't have policies and structures in place that actually encourage, that actually support supervisors making compassionate decisions, right? Then supervisors that maybe don't have enough training or understanding or just are anxious and don't want to get in trouble are going to rely on policy. And if policy doesn't support tending to humans being humans, right? Not removing accountability, there still needs to be accountability, not removing expectation, right? Those are still really important, but to have that, but also with policy in place that allows for compassion and connection, right? If that's not built in, then the supervisor is forced to rely on their gut instinct. And if their gut instinct is not necessarily tied to that or is anxious, they're less likely to be compassionate, and they're more likely to go to the letter of the law, and that sometimes can be harmful.
I would say it's a trickle-down effect.
Yes.
And I think it's a trickle-down effect for a few reasons. One is, first of all, as leaders, maybe that's more expansive to include all of the different types of leaders we have here on campus, kind of being able to model the behavior as well, to say, you know, like, I'm overloaded, I'm oversaturated, I'm going to take some time off, or I'm going to take a walk outside, or I'm going to, I don't know, take my favorite yoga class. Maybe it's just me. Or also being willing to say, you know what, I see a difference in you. Can you talk to me about what's going on? And what can I do to support you right now? Or just saying, have you thought about taking a walk and not being worried about that policy, right, that says you have to be sitting at your desk all day or whatever it says. So I think when we also, and we've seen this in the data, when leadership, and let's talk about administrators, for example, which I think also captures
Absolutely.
chairs and whatnot. When leaders are feeling stressed and when they know that their stress is impacting their health and their work, we see a trickle-down effect when everybody else in the organization, whether it's students, faculty, and staff,
Everybody.
are seeing a heightened level of stress, right? And so I think I love that you've brought this into the conversation because I do think it's something that we need to kind of hold a mirror up to ourselves and say,
Dr. Travis, in my 25 years of connection with the Employee Assistance Program, one thing, I used to get really frustrated when I saw leaders act in a way that was shame-based or scarcity-oriented, because leaders cast a huge shadow on everybody in the unit or department. And then all of a sudden I realized, you know, these leaders have no more likelihood of getting that core set of skills I was talking about than I did or that anybody else did. Like, where is it that they were going to stumble across these skills? And so we need to be intentional about making sure that group of people, the executive leaders and administrators, also get a chance to learn this core set of skills, because we would all benefit from emotionally resilient, psychologically flexible supervisors and leaders with growth mindset and the ability to be a witness, because they're most dangerous. Most toxic leaders don't know that they're toxic and would be shocked if somebody said that. It's because they are so on autopilot, dealing with the hot, fiery tennis balls coming at them, that, you know, beat them back to circus music, right? That they aren't even seeing that they're saturated, and if you go back to the sponge metaphor, they're soggy and they're flinging stress juice everywhere, including their partners, their children, the people they're providing care for, their neighbors, right? And so we have to help those folks also wake up the part of them that can witness. And there's no judgment in it. It's just, I'm either saturated right now or I'm not. And if I am, what are the strategies that I have learned that I can do in motion so that I'm less dangerous, more grounded, more centered, and therefore more value guided? And we have these great values and mission statements, but people often are out of alignment because they don't see that they're saturated.
Yeah, that's such great conversation. And so it saddens me to have to ask the last question. When stress is high, what are some of the realistic strategies people can do to turn that moment around?
I feel like that's you starting one.
Mostly we want to, when you're really saturated with stress, our stress cycles don't just complete on their own. Like, so the problem is we have so many stressors happening and there's not enough time between them. So we think we're going to ring out now, but we're going to wait till we get home. And so then we end up saturated. And the way to like help yourself is you have to give your body the clue and let your body know that right now you're actually not in threat. Right now, you're actually safe enough to come off of high alert. And when we come off of high alert, when we drop out of fight flight, we drop back into grounded, the stress juice can loosen and the stress cortisol can start to move out of your system. And so there's lots of things that we don't do when we're in fight flight that we can do when we're grounded. And so doing those things gives your body the cue that it's okay to release. And so deep breathing does that. Laughter, actually, whether the laughter is real or fake, I could make you start laughing just by being ridiculous. And if you start laughing, your body's going to, because we don't laugh when we're running from a tiger, right? Physical movement, and not like a full, complete workout, but just heart rate variability, getting your heart rate up, down, up, settle. Singing, crying, sobbing. If you still have the ability to cry, regardless of your gender, celebrate that, because that is the body's most natural way to let it. It's literally letting the stress juice leak out of your face. And just to give yourself some moment to have that, trusting that that makes you stronger, not weaker.
Physical touch.
Physical touch, affection.
Affection.
Not just affection, but like leaning in. You know, when you give somebody a hug and you hold it long enough to feel your body drop, right? Jon and I have this experience with each other when we spend time together. We can both feel each other drop. Like we're supporting each other to release that stress juice at work.
Yeah.
It's not personal self-care. It's here.
Right. It's just here, right?
It's just here.
It's dropping in, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that, because that's all critical and really important stuff. But and to start with giving yourself permission, right, to actually make your health a priority, right, to make that something that you are going to decide matters. That often is an intentional decision, particularly if, whether because of the culture that we're working in that expects like high achievement, or because our own values and assumptions about success and achievement and work are tied into overworking, we may not have ever given ourselves permission. We might think that there's something wrong with that, or that is a sign of weakness, or I'll get to that when I have time, which we never have time, right? So that being a conscious and very intentional choice, making your health a priority and deciding that you're going to do something with that, lends itself to then being able to see these things.
Such a great note to end on, giving yourself permission to be able to take care of your own health and well-being. I want to thank our guests again today for joining us and for such a great conversation and time of sharing. For those of you joining us online and listening to the podcast, thank you. Remember that your health and well-being matter, and you matter, and the work that you do matters as well. And until next time, I'm your host, Dr. Alexis Travis. Thank you. Be well.